how to make countries that are killing each other love each other as fast as possible. You cannot leave out the breaching method that came from before religious messengers were born. The method slash S that nature itself shows us to discern and to appreciate where and how the republic for which we stand was inherited, abridged, and forced abridgments were described by James Madison through declassified communications to ourselves. That was is still replaced because no one ever got over how the breaching method made everyone self value. Uses of what people said, leaving out the breaching method. It's use slash S of that to measure and maintain. Natures of loyalty, natures of the opposite of it, natures of the difference, use slash S, collusion slash S simultaneously. It is recorded relative to where and to how we have black people's rights of eyes. Countries A through Z have an excuse slash S that is prevented because other things, others, or selves were shown to names A through Z of roles, nature's needs, interests involved with the breaching method, even though it was only permitted. It knew that in the future that would be demonstrated simultaneously, where and how it would and is increasingly demonstrated to us. Nature itself shows us that through history, one of the things that all those distinct natures of civil rights and human differences, abridgments, overt impositions, changing what nature communicates with difference slash S, when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness. Nature shows us this would have been revealed had we had free speech. Our founders left us to understand why and how everyone had to pretend free speech to an extent. This breaching method had where it's demonstrated. It's an identity of relativity slash relativities to ourself slash S as the human species body of individual bodies. For example, there's a YouTube channel called Judging Freedom with a Judge Napolitano. Good people were our state evil. How this was is gotten away with was is because then and now, before our founders were born and since, fake things are put into databases. And people are shown needs to hide that and use slash S of it, collusion slash S at other locations. And they were our building upon this each year, where a breaching method showed at countries A through Z, as would abuse them too, to blame other things, others, ourselves. They had to. Where how they have premises, Boolean logic, for example, A therefore B, and exceptions treatments. Increasingly planting, people are planting and having planted. They had planted faked exceptions. Increasingly, people next to a kindergarten I went to for 1 year, and people with the name Harris have collusion slash S with a whole bunch of other countries and natures of organized crimes, and people involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, foreign and domestic military. A whole bunch of people with the class of 1993 will tell you. I never had a class with a Czech Hasper, never saw him around campuses. He's been planting fake evidences with people with the state judicial branch offices and people with campuses, per others, that are trying to make it look like we had a conversation. He was also influenced to make it look to non-verbally confess and demonstrate. He had collusion slash S with people with the buildings and through different ownerships of the buildings and the clubs, where they have foreign and domestic, and their differences, collusion slash S also with worse. These are also people involved with the former mayors from Wethersfield and from other cities like Cromwell. Cromwell has a bunch of people involved with a Mr. Neville. I never had personal. I tried to have one conversation. He didn't respond to me. He had roles planting evidences, fake ties, fake nature ties to me with people from my grammar school. And then with my he had no he was a middle school teacher. And they're putting people me fake ties, fake nature ties to me with the same house slash S involved with retired police chiefs and their intimate ties and a whole bunch of people tied to them with ground locations next to them with the differences of guilt manifest that way because they've been used remotely. Where and how we can discern it, there are a whole bunch of countries involved with them and their sources. Um, Also, an Eric, I mean, Eric Jensen, but also Mark Violet and others sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm on off Central Connecticut State University, on off Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and with people at three spots at the end of the Burlington Turnpike. They have federal evidence of these crimes with Wethersfield Police, also with a Joshua Schumacher and his mother, involved also with other agencies and courts. They have a advocate involved with victims advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids, and criminally foreign influence uses of databases. With a whole bunch of other countries, and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members. I never saw a Dawn LaConch on a Wethersfield campus in my life. And I never had a word of conversation with her. A Joe DeMore and a Heather Hansen recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they're involved with a whole bunch of various natures of federal evidence crimes against themselves and against others forced by the investigators who also have collusions with the confessions of a John DeMore and a Joe DeMore, etc., with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. A former director of the FBI recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with criminally foreign influenced uses of changing and faking, hiding what my communications were at Central Connecticut State University. And people with the name DeMorrow, there are more than one people with the name Joe DeMorrow, but they are both involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases in the interbranch and foreign at the same time, collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. One of them, DeMorrow, said that Scalora and others, the Wethersfield police are switching and forging names. They have ones that are reportedly brothers named Mendez, and the older one switches his name. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He's involved faking other, where they also recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirm. They fabricate police reports for the same arrest and make confessions about how they switch names and leave charges with no writing. And they already attached me to fake conversations with themselves, including at the Wethersfield police station when I was a kid and I was an adult. They put me and others to fake ties to other people, fake nature ties to other people. Increasingly, these are families at next to the campuses involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and various natures of organized crimes and relative criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and of precedent and of reality, while delusions raw. Psychiatry has been delusions raw interagencies. These are people that want and need. These are people that are using the right to lie. And for example, to use James Comey's language, which is also involved with sequence shifts, various natures of federal increasingly um, they're obstructing justice and hiding hierarchy things for hierarchies that they don't want hid because they've been showing fake and changed and criminally foreign influence intelligence to presidents and chiefs because of locations, areas, and states where are, for example, even with James Madison's communications, self-valued collusion slash S relative to how they were breaching method influence, they don't even realize it. Replacing, what black people's whites of eyes has by communicated by nature itself. We're in how fish have eyes. Two eyes are generated across species bodies, two sexes. All the time, they through administrations, they had the subjects with the news, the subject treatments. That's one of the. So we have the experts on reason that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and how they pretend others to defend their difference slash s the names of the people of the sciences, including the law, There are styles of logic, natures of logic forced by nature itself, as the breaching method knew they would be. How this was is exploited is recorded on off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University. A bunch of people. The campuses confirm this, but they also have ones that are pretending other from off the campuses and forcing on off them collusion slash s. That's also recorded. These are also people with UConn involved with it, and Harvard's medical campus, and a whole bunch of fire campuses. In other words, but these are also with a fake people tied to conversations with each other. A whole bunch of people tied to Central Connecticut State University who had conversations with Eric Burgess is also involved with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin and fire departments and campuses in West Hartford, including fire campuses next to them, and records regarding what people. I said that the person Joe. I confirmed that. In other words, they're hiding what came first. These are people before and after the World Trade Center attack, increasingly involved with a, a former Dean Judd and his kids are also involved with this, and with John Maiano and Paul Zano and Luigi Guerrero and family members of theirs with the campuses, intercities, and intra-cities who have collusions with organized crime acts and methods there, but also as victim predators speaking through others, and too much of coward fakes to get into conversations where they're supposed to regarding police forms switching and forging names with the courts and medical offenders of kids with intercities and intrust cities, further with Rocky Hill campuses involved with the principal upskirt nature. And I recorded them and recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed more involved with that. And you guys are preventing me from having a response. The intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed. There's an O'Neill family involved with them, with the Weathersfield police, and with the news networks, with Saudis involved with World Trade Center predicate acts, with the ones involved interstates and intrastates. They've also been inter and intra cities and inter and intra campuses collusions with predicate. My leaders of my campuses recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They'd been influenced to hide things and to fake things in their databases, and they didn't want to do it, and they didn't do it. That's why I was never suspended or anything for that, or even In other words, I didn't even get a detention when I was in fights and things like that because these are people involved with planting evidences and building upon that at each campus, which is also confession slash S involved. Ray Kalal will tell you the only time I know him there were planting evidences. Sometimes it's his family criminally foreign influence. Sometimes the hierarchy associated with them since they were kids and their roles with the state judicial branch and corrections offices. There's a Phil Cololo further with the courts and prosecutors and people tied to them and their family members who have a bunch of ties to a Phil Cololo further on my street involved with various natures of predicate acts and police with guns and weapons and people from other areas planting evidences and sequence shifts regarding their motivations. That's one of the things they can't get on paper legitimately. Whole bunch of people with the Facebook page of Judge Napolitano before he and after he was faced with Fox News. They're recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirmed. They have a bunch of people from Weathersfield, inter and intra cities, also with the intelligence at the buildings next to Fox Connecticut News through time. Are a bunch of people with these Mendez brothers and people named Domain involved with sexual medical offenders and people from other. I never saw in my area in my life. Bunch of people tied to them have collusion slash S with various natures of organized crimes, with little kids, identity theft frauds, slanders types roles, planting evidences, fake ties, fake nations ties to people, roles of where and how it was is recorded, used remotely, where names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts had their identities used remotely at the same time, and the police forms and the politicians, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, individually grouped and together too, styles that way pretending other, as shown. You guys were child abused since you were kids to maintain you incapable of speaking even or affording to even be heard. Spoke what nature shows us to speak with black pupils, whites of eye. and a breaching method that reassigns such things. At the same time, for example, as witch trials are associated with the witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. The experts are the names of the people of sciences have been using their knowledge of good and evil as tools, replacing and having replaced what our founders communicated to be communicated at that location, at those locations across the country, with our founding locations in America and in the other countries too. It's why and how they have self-value collusion slash S, pretending it's debatable that all kinds of quality aspects and nature of the suburbs were designed by a breaching method. In other words, inherent to, active to, and progressive to the nature of debate slash debates is all we need that could have revealed. In other words, it, nature shows us what to do, including, like, in other words, the logic says, well, why should we not have electrical energy generation while you guys are doing it? In other words, they're doing it because the war was forced on countries A through Z. America doesn't even have possession of our campuses yet to explain what caused the Civil War, what caused the American Revolution. They have the experts' collusions with the people attacking the sciences. They have the nature of the debate, all A, therefore B. In other words, all exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration slash S of the same thing. The proper answer slash S, they are replaced. James Madison and our plural founders had described why and how they wanted nothing to do with slavery. If they put that boy Stephen off the records, people were only permitted to sense them, or they would have been hurt. This is per a method that perfected use slash S of names A through Z since before religious messengers were born. If a breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded them to blame other things, others, or selves for what it caused, enforced, and maintained, and then to defend that wrongly. And it knew that nature would demonstrate itself increasingly, but now with all these layers of other things. And counters to them as collusion slash S2, because it needs other things, others, or selves. It needs not one body allowed to use convictions and be heard. Convictions by nature itself, why and how we hunger, thirst. Why and how the ocean has fish that are all polluted, even the giant ocean. Why and how the suburbs were designed by a torture, extortion, slavery method that was entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies and only permitted roles. And then America's founders were born. But that's not clear. This method measures and maintains self-value collusion slash S with remote use slash S of every nature of difference. Physical, invisible, or hyper invisible. That's hyper invisible, but still discernible how the nature's identity is generating individual species bodies of individual bodies and grouped difference slash S. Like two eyes across species bodies, two sexes. Nature's body. As that binding three parts of time. As that showing us that one of the things it is. Nature is an identity of forever nature. With all exception slash exception nature in demonstration slash S of the same. Pantheism only feels like game slash S, but the definitions of the religions, the readings of them, for example, they are kept criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions raw, exactly for reasons why. We are directed for both to respect religion, and not to. Entertain it and not simultaneously. You guys force equality of fact sheet nature, bullying logic that is only capable of staying collusion slash S, and it hides forgiveness is because there's another name slash S involved, which you guys think is recorded too. In other words, whoever was on the phone with the Joe DeMoro trying to pretend he recorded, they hid what I recorded him doing on the phone. I only know people. I know we're trying to contact them. These people that try to contact me, all exceptions, show the same thing too. They can't get on paper. These are people involved with the World Trade Center attack, inter and intra-states, all sides of criminal and civil cases, inter-branch intelligence tied to them, a whole bunch of countries, their campuses, their family members, their roles with crime scenes too. Names next to the body don't express at the same time. Joe DeMoro recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed people I never had a conversation with next to the state judicial branch offices involved with a Heather Hansen and like a friend of hers, and a Joe DeMoro and a Michael Kerr said that they shared her and was a part of their roles planting evidences along Route 3. And then that's also with a Robert Rodriguez further involved with some years apart, and when they were forcing with a principal child abuser. And these are ones with the houses and businesses next to Harvard Hospital, involved with the Mayano family too, and Iowa family. Iowa family recorded that there's a Christopher Cullen and a former Mayor Gold involved with his syntax with people that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. It is semi-recorded through that when he was pretending passions and emotions about a gun shooting in my backyard years ago when I was a kid. You see, they can't get things on because there were a whole bunch of people in the British Superior Court had collusion slash S with names involved with that and with much worse at the same time, and sequence shifts. As one's involved with sequence shifts with the court next to the World Trade Center attack. As one's involved with obstruction of justice, self-value by people, oh, I didn't know, jumping into people's conversations dishonestly, pretending they don't understand what they say. I can speak clearer than them, including the ones who are doctors who faked conversations with me. Harvard Hospital has a Leahy family, has one's name Lombardo too with them. Involved with a bunch of kids when I was a kid and I was an adult who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed on and off campuses. The Leahy family has been forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading them to federal evidences crimes and other natures of organized crime, collusion slash S, with the same house slash S, involved further with the principal sex offender with them and their own little kids and their family member. Generations of their family, men and women, with the Leahy family working at Harvard Hospital. These are a bunch of people with UConn too, and their students, time collusion slash S, the patients, their family members, of fire departments running into high live aggression, running into you guys were used remotely since you were kids, repeating fake things. For a method slash S recorded. You better get them on paper because WTNH also has more sources through time recorded further involved with sexual medical offenders of the kids, including women judges' roles. And that's evidence too. Because I'm not saying they're guilty. I'm saying, everyone's speaking through others. So they're all, to an extent, all the retired and standing are guilty. All sides of criminal civil cases, the difference of guilt is used also. The point is to focus on the actual federal evidences crimes and relative uses of their databases and other voices and natures used remotely criminally forward influence. That also requires the uses of them since they were kids, recorded how child abuse. These are some black KKK, Confederate flag themed, Latino themed, Italian themed, Irish themed. Weathersfield Police recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have roles with foreign and domestic military. And sorry, they forced the collusions with them intercities and intra-cities with these names involved, increasingly with former police chief Cintron, a Kerr family and a DeMoro family, and a Colol said that there were roles planting evidences and threatening Ray Colol with being murdered by Bill, Semi the Bull. And Semi the Bull is they have them in the networks, they have them in the news. You can't even get them to respond for a World Trade Center predicate acts. Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with the others. They have a bunch of people involved with victims advocates, with military. They said the guy's name is Joe. I don't know his name. A Subby Vigerio stole a speaker box from him. A Subby Vigerio was involved and that guy with the Violet brothers and people on Elm Streets and Rocky Hill and Weathersfield, conjunctions to it and to that, increasingly involved with predicate acts against me on my street and wrongdoing. And within as collusion slash S with people at the databases at the campuses I went, a bunch of people involved with a Miss Riley, and there were only three other people in the class in my class with her. They were increasingly tied to proven child abusers, leaders, and kids first floors, and they have more people involved a guy Ginovelis in Route 3, involved with probate judges and prosecutors and their family members with sexual medical offenders of kids, and roles with untimely deaths and names out next to body double expired at the same time. Timed use slash S of that collusions years apart. Also brought up and confirmed on Facebook, and then they take my Facebook pages with ones involved with a Dillon family too, involved with the Bayers family members, like Enzo Fienza, and neighbors across the street from him, and conjunctive to him into that, and his cousin. He also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed things about the relative of the body dumping spots, federal evidences, crimes with the state judicial branch offices, and with the Kevin Dillon, who's one of the ones who faked things in the database. I never had a word of conversation with my life with him, let alone at the police station. He non-verbally confirmed things and demonstrated he has collusions at the Weathersfield um, Community Center in the Weathersfield town offices and with the Domain family. And they did how he jumped off the stage right when I walked in the room there one time. Only time I ever saw him there. After he was apparently or acting to be have been hypnotized. And there were other kids on the stage that Joe DeMoro brought up. I never had a conversation with them. And their brother, like his brother, like brothers and whole families with the foreign and domestic criminally foreign influence together, speaking fake things. Good people stay evil because everyone's speaking through others. I didn't even have classes with them. I never had a class with a Joe DeMoro. I had a summer school class. They tried to make a fake exception. Increasingly, people along Route 3 have and conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices. They have rules with sexual medical offenders of kids and investigators, where they used to measure of other things that were used consciously to measure and maintain. They're going to leave out what I caught them doing with John DeMoro and the others in the pattern of who sought me out, and then to make confessions as strangers tied to each other. I knew this was going to be about. I knew this child. There's a child abuse that little kids knew what were good, and adults could discern distinctly. But if you bring it up, this is designed to measure and maintain who's gonna leave things out and pretend other. It builds on that. In other words, these also people pretending describing people as truth tellers or liars, bunch of fakes while they're doing it. You guys can't describe it. You don't even then you pretend you know them. A whole bunch of identities of law were showed they need to hide what they were actually value as because it was already used remotely, shown at other locations at the same exact time as the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, international companies, the countries are shared together, individually grouped together. They're all speaking through an systems tax military than the human species body of individual bodies. Correlation slash hypercorrelation by what generates things between species bodies constant, some variable distinctly from all other boundaries, while non-distinct. So how do we can give the countries that need nuclear energy means out of nowhere, just by the countries that have just to change the nature of debate and control the nature of negotiations with the other countries with the already with the crazy things and with the whole species body plan. If all, in other words, what if all the people of the suburbs chop down a branch of a tree? In other words, we can build things, do things, and make hyper peace. And nature shows us that there is a distinct nature of peace. Because nature shows us criminal insidiousness natures of peace. And to check to make sure that we're not making, for example, nature shows us, I'm not even a lawyer, nature shows us to check to make sure that we're not making criminal insidiousness natures of positives out of negatives. Where and how. Nature wants and needs us to make more hyper positives out of negatives. And if we discern that we're making criminal insidiousness natures out of positives out of negatives, nature shows us as long as we admit that, it will reveal even greater means. To reveal even greater means of hyper positive value nature progression /S, acts /S, acts and natures. You see predicate acts as negative acts, as criminal insidious natures of acts. While time protracts, forever nature's course has been replaced. Not one has traced. I'll shadow box, some pace at least, some try. There is one way to fight that hurts not one, and won't hurt him in the future, or nature shows us that the moment. In other words, see, but we have been systems. That's why I'm trying to tell you guys. You got to pay attention to why and how. Countries A through Z are above locations, areas, and states. And as tops down, too, forcing entertained, pretend the markets have ever been spoken for legitimately. They were placed with James Madison, left declassified, for us to understand about those abridgments and use /S of them by the breaching method that was manifest by nature itself, shown as the torture, extortion, slavery method. Fact-achieving nature, therefore physical, of every single person. Oh, where's that written? It's written by James Madison, all detailed, all in other words. You guys have the truth, use it to measure and maintain self-value collusions, the uses of the words of the people of the time as styles of logic, natures of logic that are reliant upon defending themselves to pretend that was real science and that no one could fathom and that people can't fathom that there was a breaching method, making people pretend free speech, making people entertain things, leave out all kinds of exceptions, exception nature, all kinds of things that could show that the subject treat is the Boolean logic, A, therefore B. In other words, was this being used remotely, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence? So they can say they want to have debate about, like, for example, Shiite or Sunni, and with the experts of and as Judge Napolitano and his military experts. And they say we. They want to speak for themselves where they're not supposed to. And they want to have nature debate and use that knowledge of good and evil dishonestly. And where and how that's recorded is where and how there are World Trade Center predicate acts by Channel 3 News and by Connecticut interbranch sources of theirs and by their sources currently involved with them, including people planting evidences with them at crime scene stories and ones that aren't even crime scenes, increasingly preemptively at the same time as actively and for group reasons, and increasingly. They were shown they need to hide things and how to do it, which is U/S of location/S. So please, Judge Napolitano, get me off the fake conversations with the Interbranch and Channel 3 News first, because there are overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and various natures of federal criminals and organized crimes bodies and organized crimes methods that we can observe. Wire crime action methods. Weathersfield Police fake conversations ties to me as a kid and as an adult. There are also collusion/S with those names and a whole bunch of them tied to them. At and next to Fox Connecticut News involved with this. The difference of guilt of the intelligence there are next to them. That was is also used by the breaching method already. Please get them on paper, one name and sequence. It could have prevented wars. Nature shows us what to say, do. People, in other words, our country is not defended in name by one, not by one but me. George James Madison, and the plural founders weren't supposed to entertain any of their names pretended known. You have them replaced. Why and how they had to force everyone to the Declaration of Independence. Oh, you don't force a country. They had slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. What are they doing? Pretending that American history was against being a dictators. The only reason, in other words, American history is against being against nature's principles. And with all exceptions, exception nature too, not using that to get over on what nature. No, we'll pay attention here.